Team Canada's management is under heavy fire after another disappointing World Juniors, which dictates that everything is going to change for Team Canada going forward. We're going to break down quotes, backlash, and everything in between on this video. But before we get into that, I just want to say to the 92.4% of you guys that are not subscribed yet, if you're enjoying this daily World Juniors and NHL content, make sure to go down and hit that subscribe button. We'll be here all season giving you updates from around the league. But with that, Darius, we gotta hop straight into these juicy topics on Team Canada and their collapse, leading into the first one. Canada's GM, when asked who is to blame, there's 4 or 5 teams that could win this tournament, and other teams try too. We're not the only team that tries. It wouldn't make any changes on the lineup we had, and that's personal that we had. Now, first off, I just want to say this is an awful quote coming from Team Canada, and I'm just going to let you take it away with your thoughts and opinions on it.
I mean, this is one of the most insane quotes I've seen in hockey in a long time. And I feel like it's not even getting that much press right now. And a lot of people, well, it was making the rounds yesterday, but I feel like mainstream media isn't really talking about how ridiculous of a quote this is. Yeah, everybody in that tournament is trying to win, but so are you. And on paper, you probably have one of the better rosters and you should probably make it, further to the finals or try and win, right? At that point, I know other teams are trying to, but that's like saying, 32 teams are trying to win the Stanley Cup. Of course, right? But you have to do your best to win and put the best roster together. And for him to come out and say that we actually wouldn't change anything after the failure that was this tournament, an absolute failure, I think, in all Canadians' eyes and anybody who watched this tournament. And again, I'm not blaming the players, right? Like the players are selected, they come to camp. Nobody's going to take that away from them. They have that accomplishment, right? And I'm not trying to take anything away from the players, and I'm not trying to take anything away from other teams as well. I think Czechia is a great team. There's a lot of really good teams in this tournament, USA, Sweden, just to name a few. But those teams bring the best players available. And I feel like Team Canada did not do that. And again, not trying to rag on the players. They made the team and they tried their best. But I feel like a lot of decisions in this year's tournament specifically were absolutely mind-boggling, from roster decisions to lineup decisions to the power play decisions. Everything was mind-boggling, didn't make sense, didn't make common sense. And then, for the GM to come out after and say, I wouldn't change anything, I think that's ridiculous. And I feel like there needs to be major change. I mean, this goes without saying. I think a lot of people feel the same. Major change in Hockey Canada.
And I mean, looking at this, we can continue on to more quotes from the coach himself on the penalty problem. It's an individual thing, it's a character thing. They had to decide. I'm pretty sure they will. I think lessons learned. This is another thing where I don't have the quote, but he continues on to saying you can't really bench guys in this tournament. It's a short tournament. But the biggest thing is, if you have a player on the ice, and I'm not going to call out any player individually, but if you have a player that consistently gets into the box, you need to start shorting this lineup. You see it happen in the playoffs in the NHL. They need to shorten the lineup once you continue getting deeper and deeper, and when it's an elimination game. You can continue on to Dave Cameron once again on saying why the team didn't practice more. Because we were exhausted. There's no system for tired hockey players, and once again, I think this is just a bogus excuse. This was a team that was closest to the arena than any other team. They had the shortest distance to travel. Looking at this, I know there was a whole situation about them not practicing. It was a lot of video reviews. Do you think this is once again just a poor excuse on why they did this?
A horrible excuse. Absolutely horrible. They were the closest team to the arena. They had the shortest travel out of every other team in this tournament. They didn't practice. The coach came out, Dave Cameron came out and said that practice doesn't build chemistry, which is one of the more insane things I've ever heard in the sport. Besides all of that, they have 2 guys on the team that were playing musical chairs. And I mentioned this in our previous video, musical chairs of being scratched every game. And they play on the same team in the OHL and the Brampton Steelheads. And that's Carson Rakoff and Porter Martone. So they had built-in chemistry that they just did not use all tournament. They didn't practice. I think it's ridiculous. That's one of the most insane excuses I've heard. And I think Dave Cameron at this point, he's coached Team Canada a lot, especially at the junior level. And I think he's a very accomplished junior coach, right? He's made finals, all of this. But at this point, they have to look in a different direction. This was an absolute colossal failure. And for him to also come out and say that, the penalties are an individual thing to a degree, yes. But if you continue to put the players who are taking penalties consistently in consecutive games and multiple in the same games on the ice, that does kind of fall on the coaching staff as well. So I think it also had something to do with roster construction. I feel like Team Canada, or Hockey Canada, I should say, looked at this tournament and tried to build a team as if they were playing a 7-game series against another team, which just wasn't the case. They had a lot of role players. Dave Cameron brought one of his players from the Ottawa 67s that made the team over a lot of other players that probably could have added some goal scoring. So I feel like in doing that, they were going to take more penalties. The games are officiated differently in the IIHF than the NHL or the OHL or any CHL league. So I feel like that probably had something to do with it. And Mark, there was a lot made out of, players being snubbed. And a lot of people, we saw the comments on our last video were saying there should have been more players from the Q. There should have been more players from the W. I feel like there should have been a lot more players from the OHL actually on this team, but replacing other players from the OHL. So I think it was just a botched roster management decision, whatever you want to call it.
And I mean, looking at that, that's the biggest thing. It's more of a like, it felt like a political thing. You can go in, I'm not going to read through this. Once again, the GM spoke out on the being exhausted with this team. But looking at this and going back to Dave Cameron, before I get into the cut players and the snubbed players, this is Brandon Kitchen. If you're from St. John's, Newfoundland, he played with the Ice Caps. Former player of Dave Cameron. He said he's an arrogant guy, not a player's coach in my opinion, would threaten to send young Australian players down to the second league almost every day. Not surprised he didn't pick the best players, very egotistical, and I think it does get into him selecting players from his team. You can work your way through this tweet. We did cover this before. On players cut from this, you can go down a list of about 12 names. We've seen so many names thrown around. I know you have a lot of notable ones that you thought should make this team. But looking at this, do you think Dave Cameron maybe had a huge say on this selection of the team since he was the coach?
Yes, and I don't want to name players specifically, but it's very obvious. When you look at the roster, a guy like Luca Pinelli made the team, and no disrespect to him, I think he's a great player. He scored in this tournament, and he's a great player for the Ottawa 67s. But Dave Cameron coaches him, so he brought his own guy, right? When you have guys like Beckett Seneca sitting at home, who's the OHL player of the month, Michael Misa, right? He leads the league in points. They're sitting at home. They should be on this team. You needed goal scoring, right? And you didn't get the goal scoring. And in terms of coaching as well, they were trying some weird things. Oliver Bonk moves to the bumper position on the power play, for example. Not where he should be. They were trying things every game that, putting players in situations that they never played in. It worked out for Porter Martone, where he tipped that puck in the quarterfinals game against Czechia. But to have him in front of the net, I thought was a puzzling decision as well. It worked out, so maybe I was wrong in that way, but a lot of very puzzling decisions from Dave Cameron. And again, like that quote you brought up, not really a player's coach, very egotistical, right? It seemed in this tournament, you could see play by play sometimes that, he's doing things that don't really make common sense. You can see it on the ice. And it's just because that's the way he feels it should be. And I think that you sometimes have to make adjustments on the fly in tournaments like this because it really goes minute to minute. These are, single elimination games.
And I mean, looking at that, and I like how you said they didn't really know what they could do with certain players. Practice for damn sake. It's so easy to get these players on the ice, see how it works in practice. If it doesn't work in practice, you can scratch it. But guess what? If you don't practice, you cannot try these things. But getting into some of the players, we have quotes from Calum Ritchie. He said, "It sucks. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, not the way we wanted it." You can work your way down and see that Gavin McKenna also spoke out. It was a special group. He was in tears while saying this. Didn't have anything to show for it. You can work your way into the London Knights gym, speaking out on Easton Cowan, who received so much backlash from this tournament as well, saying Easton's a strong person. He went 56 OHL games with a point. It's not a fluke. The consistency is there. He cares. He wants to win. He has character. He's in our family here, in our group. He knows we got his back. And this was once again coming from the disgusting backlash from Easton Cowan. Did he have the best tournament? No. This is not a one-on-one basketball tournament. This is a full team, playing a full team that obviously was not constructed right. And talking about construction, you can see a quote from Don Cherry himself saying, "Don't be too hard on the kids. They tried their best. They seem right all tournament. Hockey Canada has to get with it, hire a full-time coach for the World Juniors, under 18, under 17, get some consistency." And this is a quote that I really do agree with. And do you have any final thoughts on just how the backlash came and Don Cherry's quote about consistency with this program?
Yeah, I think that the program needs an overhaul. Everything at this point. They absolutely have to do it because this was a disaster. Canada can be so much better than this. And not just better than this, but when you fail, accept the failure and, give some plans as to what you're going to work on in the future. Not say that you wouldn't change anything and it might be different next time, because we know it won't, right? We saw the holes in their game. So the last thing I want to say before we wrap up too is, like, none of this can be put on the players. All of the players that were selected, congratulations to them. Nobody's going to take that away from you. You played for Team Canada in the World Junior Hockey Championships, right? And there's other teams that are making their way up the leaderboards, the rankings, whatever you want to say, right? Because obviously they're putting together good programs and they're getting better. So credit to them as well. But this doesn't fall on the players. If you want to blame anyone, blame Hockey Canada, the management, GM, the coaching. They didn't make any adjustments. I don't think that they selected the best team possible. So if you are going to blame anyone, blame them. They should have put together a better team. And at the end of the day, there should be some more stability or just a better game plan going into next tournament. Or, there's a lot of tournaments that a lot of people don't watch. This one is put on, full display around Christmas time, but there's some all year round that, similar things are happening as well. And that's U18, U16, right? So Hockey Canada needs to do some retooling, that's for sure.
And I completely agree. But what's your guys' thoughts on these quotes coming out from the GM, from the coach, from the players and GMs of other teams? Let us know down in the comments. Right down there, leave a like, subscribe, share this with your friends. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode, so keep your eyes out for that. But I've been your host, Mark, with my co-host, Darius, and take care.